SEASPRAY, an effort of the U.S. Army and the CIA to make a covert and secret aviation unit capable of providing clandestine air power. This is a level above the Tier 1 units, like Delta Force and DevGru, which on themselves are held in secrecy. I'll explain what I mean by that. It was formed around 1981, and since then, the U.S. government has cast a large shadow over the origins and existence of this unit. It is believed that it was later dissolved into what is now known as Delta Force. The reason these kinds of units are able to fly under the radar, pun intended, is that everybody who should know of this unit knows not to speak of it or tell anything to anyone about it. Plausible deniability plays a big role here. Government leaks or people that want to harm the operations of the government by leaking classified information are the most important sources for any of these units ever seeing the light. If anything comes close to what we see in movies and video games being referred to as Black Ops, this is it. Now, let me tell you all about this unit there is to tell. Time for a little history of Special Ops. September 1980, General Schultz of the 82nd Airborne Division gets a call from the Chief of Staff. You will be leaving the division on short notice. I cannot tell you why at this moment. We'll speak as soon as you arrive at the Pentagon. These words would later lay the foundation for what is believed to be the most secretive aviation of all time, together with the existence of what we know today as JSOC, or the Joint Special Operations Command. The briefing at the time was to conduct a hostage rescue mission, no later than the 31st of October of that year, and the general would be given the command of the unit that was formed to carry it out. Originally, the former name of JSOC was Counter-Terrorist Joint Task Force, but after Schultz took office, he and Major Logan Fitch, who was assigned from Delta Force, came up with a new name that was more fitting to their purpose and mission. Now, the new and first commanding officer in the history of JSOC quickly came to realize that they lacked specific rotor wing capabilities. After the infamous Desert One fiasco, the 101st Airborne Division's aviation battalions stepped up to form Task Force 158 and train air crews on the new UH-60A Black Hawk. However, despite these efforts, the Black Hawks were still ill-suited for navigating the tight urban spaces of Tehran. Enter Major General James Vaughn, who recognized the potential of the Hughes OH-6 costs. But with no room for weapons or passengers, TF-158 had to get creative. They modified the cost to carry operators on small, side-borne platforms and outfitted it with cutting-edge weaponry and countermeasures. Behold the MH-6 and the AH-6, the legendary Little Bird that would rise to meet the challenge. Amidst the tumultuous SEASPRAY rise in 1980, a new player emerged, the U.S. Army's Field Operations Group, or FOG. This covert team, composed of just 50 highly trained operators, was shrouded in secrecy and charged with executing dangerous missions in foreign nations. Their objective? Sabotage critical military infrastructure and gather intelligence through risky surveillance operations. In a daring move, the FOG deployed their operatives to Iran, a high-stakes mission that could make or break their reputation. With the odds stacked against them, the FOG's agents clandestinely infiltrated the country and conducted covert surveillance, recruiting local assets in the process. On the 3rd of March 1981, the Intelligence Support Activity, or ISA, was officially established in Arlington, Virginia. General Meyer had directed the staff of the FOG to simply change its name to better reflect the intended purpose of the organization, just like with the JSOC. The previous day, the CIA and the Army quietly birthed SEASPRAY, and it was sure a tumultuous time in the land of shadow and black ops. Not long after, the CIA contacted the U.S. Army. Operation Eagle Claw was a failure, and it might have had something to do with bad intel. Either way, the CIA and the Pentagon had some bad blood, and the CIA had something that the U.S. Army was lacking. They had a monopoly on covert operations since President Ford had made several reforms. It was Executive Order 11905, which prohibited assassinations by any employee of the U.S. government, and the CIA had a solution for these problems. Later on, President Carter signed Executive Order 12036, which ultimately designated the CIA as the only federal agency allowed to carry out covert activity. The U.S. Army has a clandestine operations section equipped with cutting-edge technology and equipment. Working with the CIA, this squad worked inside the law, utilizing civilian planes and heavily modified military helicopters piloted by the most skilled Army pilots. To keep these assets hidden, the CIA acquired and operated them via a front firm called Aviation Tech Services, which allowed them to avoid official government records and the prying eyes of Capitol Hill. Essentially, SEASPRAY later became known as the secret back end of the Special Operations Aviation Regiment, or 160th SOAR. This was the successor of Task Force 158, which was mentioned before. The 160th was predominantly a military unit, and SEASPRAY would be responsible for providing clandestine air service to CIA intelligence operatives. Ultimately, they would give SEASPRAY a military cover name, First Rotary Wing Test Activity. The unit would grow to work closely with Delta Force and become an integral part of Delta's capabilities. Later on in 1989, SEASPRAY became E Squadron and would become an integral part of Delta Force with the agreement that the CIA could make use of the covert aviation capabilities. Unfortunately, at that time, Echo Squadron had 15 pilots at their disposal. The newborn unit, the Black Ops character of the unit, and the requirements would be a result of that. The purpose, mission, and tactics. Obviously, there is a lot unknown about SEASPRAY. A specific source of information is the book Relentless Strike by Sean Naylor. This covers the secret history of JSOC and outlines the following information. They had 3 very broad categories, namely sensor, shooter, and transport. Transport was quickly dropped after the ISA took over the responsibilities for that end. Echo Squadron forged a path forward to build the U.S. government's covert air capabilities. They trained their elite pilots on non-U.S. aircraft to make sure they are able to fly and feel comfortable in several kinds of aircraft, which ultimately would make them more skilled pilots. It might surprise you, but the crews would be trained on Russian rotor wing aircraft like the Mi-8 and the Mi-17. In these times, these Russian aircraft were very common in most parts of the world and less likely to draw unwanted attention. Echo Squadron would carry out semi-official operations for U.S. embassies using official cover stories, as well as U.S. diplomatic missions abroad. It used publicly reported military actions to help State Department employees justify the presence of U.S. Army soldiers in that part of the world. There is, however, one account of a failed mission which is presumably linked to this unit. In December 2001, Russian security authorities seized and imprisoned Maverick Aviation representatives. Moscow accused the individuals of seeking to orchestrate the purchase of Mi-17 helicopters for the CIA and the Flight Concept Section, which was a successor entity of SEASPRAY itself. The U.S. government eventually sued Maverick for the deal's failure and accused fraud. The agency's continuous aim is to conceal American aviation assets under the guise of covert deception, and plausible deniability is leveraged. As with most of these kinds of units, they themselves were always looking for ways to get things done without U.S. government involvement, and it is only logical that the U.S. government might have known but threw up their hands in denial when things went south. As far as their missions go, there is not much to tell other than speculation and uncertainty. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments. SEASPRAY can be considered as the birth of the U.S. military's modern covert air capabilities. They played an integral part and crucial role in how special aviation operations have matured in the 21st century. This was and is understandably still held in secrecy, with good cause. It all fell together with the birth of the ISA and JSOC and is an important piece of history for Tier 1 and Black Ops units. If you like what we are doing here, please consider subscribing and leave a like. See you all in the next video.